He promised forever. Emily remembered that evening as if it had been etched into her bones. The rain was light but persistent, creating tiny rivers along the sidewalks of downtown Chicago. They had ducked into a small cafe to escape the drizzle. The warm glow of the lights felt like a bubble protecting them from the rest of the world. Mark had reached across the table and taken her hand. "I'll never leave you," he said, his eyes steady, almost desperate. "You're everything to me." She had laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries hope and trust. "Forever, huh?" she teased. And he had smiled, a faint curve of his lips that would haunt her later. For the first few months, it seemed like he would keep that promise. He'd show up early with coffee just the way she liked it, send little texts during the day, and always remembered the smallest things. Emily found herself falling deeper every day, convinced she had found someone who would weather the storms with her. They became inseparable, spending evenings walking by Lake Michigan, sharing dreams about the future. She had begun to imagine a life built around him, a quiet apartment filled with laughter and love. In those moments, she felt untouchable. But things began to shift, slowly at first. Mark became distant. The messages stopped coming as frequently. Calls went unanswered, and when he did pick up, his voice sounded tired, distracted. Emily convinced herself it was just work stress. She told herself to trust him, to give him space. But trust has its limits, and love has its own fragile boundaries. Then came the night that shattered her illusion completely. Mealy had waited for him at their favorite spot, an overlook where the city lights twinkled like distant stars. She checked her phone for the 100th time, but he never showed. Deep down, a tiny voice whispered that the worst had already arrived. A week later, the truth hit her like a sledgehammer. She stumbled upon a photograph online, Mark with someone else, smiling in a way he had only ever smiled at her. She read the caption, and everything inside her froze. The world around her blurred. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a lie stretched over months, carefully hidden behind smiles and promises. The person she had trusted with her heart had moved on without a word. Emily sat on her couch for hours that night, staring at a blank wall, replaying every moment, every word, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The silence of her apartment seemed to echo her heartbreak. The following days were a haze. Friends tried to console her, offering words that felt hollow. He wasn't worth it, they said. You'll get over him. But she couldn't see it then. It felt like a void had opened inside her, swallowing everything she had believed in. One evening, she returned to the cafe where it had all begun. The rain had returned heavier this time, drumming against the windows. She ordered a coffee and sat alone, watching the raindrops race down the glass, tracing paths like little rivers. Memories of Mark were overwhelming. She pulled out a notebook, meant for dreams, but now filled with fragments of heartbreak. Her hands shook as she wrote, "You promised forever. You chose yourself." She paused, letting the words sink in. With a deep breath, she tore the page from the notebook, crumpled it, and released it into the wind outside. The rain caught it, carrying it away into the night. It was a small act, but it felt like reclaiming something she had lost, herself. For the first time in weeks, Emily noticed life moving on without her. A couple laughed as they ran past, drenched but happy. Children splashed in puddles, their joy unapologetic. And somewhere in that motion, Emily realized that life doesn't pause for heartbreak. It continues, and so must she. She walked along the wet streets, the lights reflecting on puddles like tiny fragments of shattered dreams. Each step felt heavy at first, but gradually lighter. Memories of Mark still haunted her, but they were no longer chains. They were lessons. That night, Emily sat on her apartment balcony, wrapped in a blanket, and for the first time allowed herself to imagine what might come next. She didn't know who she would meet or when love would find her again, but she knew one thing. She would never let someone else's broken promises define her worth. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds. For the first time in months, she felt hope. Weeks later, Emily found herself laughing again, truly laughing with friends. She shared her story, but the pain was no longer sharp. It was a shadow that reminded her how far she had come. Life was imperfect and often cruel, but it was also full of moments worth living. She still walked past that cafe from time to time, but she no longer felt the sting of betrayal. Instead, she felt gratitude for love, for lessons, and for herself. She had survived the storm. She realized that love is not about promises alone. It's about actions, consistency, and presence. And if someone cannot keep their word, it is not a reflection of the one who loved, but of the one who failed to honor it. Emily had loved deeply, and even though it hurt, she had found herself in the aftermath. That was more precious than any fleeting promise could ever be. She had learned that some promises are meant to break, so that we can find the strength to keep our own. And so, in a city full of lights and endless possibilities, Emily walked forward, carrying the past not as a burden, but as a quiet reminder of the strength it had given her. She was no longer waiting for someone who never valued her love. She was waiting for herself, and in that, she found a peace that no promise could ever offer. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more content.